Well, the Aronofsky train continues.
It's also the end of it.
Yes. There will be no pie or the fountain on this video, and they're not on this channel, most likely.
Oh, I'm sure I could have done Pie or Eraserhead or something like that, but I don't think the viewers...
David Lynch could possibly see something on Versus eventually, but not for quite a while. We've got a lot of things in the can ready to go. So, we're going to find out what happens when Trainspotting battles Requiem for a Dream. AJ, take it away.
Alright, can you guess what these have in common? Now, Aronofsky has this whole thing about... I don't even know what the fuck he was on about. Something like, Requiem for a Dream is not, a drug movie in the vein of Trainspotting, or he listed off a few others. It's about... I don't even remember what he said, but Aronofsky is not under the impression that Requiem for a Dream is a drug movie. I don't know, maybe I'm taking a narrow-minded approach to it, but that's kind of what I see when I watch it.
Yeah.
I don't know what else you would call it, so... but yeah, they handle the matter in very different ways, where Requiem for a Dream is very unrelenting and extremely hard to watch. Trainspotting is also unrelenting and hard to watch, but it's a comedy.
Yes.
But we're going to start with Requiem for a Dream. We meet 4 characters, all of whom are pictured below. I'm so sorry, Marlon Wayans, but you're the only person on this cover that's not an Oscar winner now. And A Haunted House 2 is not going to get you there this year.
Nope.
But anyway, so we meet these 4 characters, and they are all drug addicts in a certain way. Our main focus is on Ellen Burstyn, who was nominated for an Oscar for this movie. And she is Sarah Goldfarb, who is obsessed with this... they say it's a game show, but it looks just like an infomercial.
Mm-hmm.
Starring Christopher McDonald as Tappy Tibbins, who is this overexcited host... who hosts this game show that she is obsessed with, and she's always sitting down with her sugar and just stuffing it into her mouth and eating unhealthy, and I can't talk at all today. I fucked up all through the reviews, too.
It wasn't as bad as you think it was.
And finally she gets this call, and it's just one of those calls where she's obviously very gullible and really lonely, because her husband, Seymour, is dead, and basically the only way she gets by is to just talk to him, even though he's not there. And, Harry, her son, played by Jared Leto, barely comes around, and when he does, he's usually taking her things to pawn them off so he can get money for drugs.
This isn't a drug movie.
So, eventually, she gets the call, and they say, hey, you have a chance to be on the show. And then, of course, it's one of those, just jerking you around phone calls, like spam, basically. And they say, well, you have a chance to be on a long list, but basically you've won. And that's all she hears. So she absolutely becomes obsessed with the idea of getting on this show, and in order to be on this show, she wants to fit into the red dress that she wore at Harry's graduation. So she tries all the dieting stuff. She tries the eggs and the grapefruit, and it's just not working for her, so she gets hooked on diet pills that her doctor gave her. So we see her battle that addiction as she just completely crash diets. Not only is she on the pills, but she also pretty much stops eating. So much so that she hallucinates the refrigerator coming to life and possibly wanting to eat her.
Yeah.
And then we follow Harry and his group, the other 3 characters in the movie. We have his girlfriend Marion and his best friend Tyrone C. Love. I love his whole name. And all they do is basically hang out together and get high, because that's all they can do. That's all that keeps them happy. And Tyrone's under the impression that he's got, like, ties to, like, the drug world, and, he can get whatever he wants whenever he wants, and he's kind of a part of that scene. He believes so, anyway. And Harry and Marion have this very fantasy romance. Like, when they're on the drugs, they're just in this world where they're, like, running around on, like, the Julie Andrews Hills and holding hands and looking at the blue sky, and just everything is wonderful. But then the second they run out, we quickly see how horrible everything can go. And the thing that Requiem for a Dream really did was, even though it's got only one at the time, but now 3 Oscar-winning actors in it, and everybody in the movie gives a great performance, and everybody talks about how Julia Roberts totally stole it from Ellen Burstyn. I don't really have much of a comment on that. I haven't seen Aaron Brockovich for a long time, but really the star of this movie, obviously, is Aronofsky and his direction. Normally, this would be really tiresome and grating, because I could easily see it coming off as one of those movies where when Soderbergh talked about the one thing you don't want to do as a director is stand in front of the camera and wave your arms and say, "Look at me, I'm directing." I think people could maybe possibly take it as that's what Aronofsky did with this movie, but the visuals in this movie kind of make it what it is. Because everything is like an extreme close-up, and we get, like, when they do the drugs or when something is happening, it's in, like, a really, really fast montage. And it kind of works as a way to, I don't know for sure because I've never been there, but to my understanding, it's a very effective way to kind of put you as the audience in the mindset of the drugged out characters. And it goes all the way to sound effects too. The sound effects are just as precise as the images we're seeing. All the way up to every time we get a close-up of the sun, it's like the sound of, like, a sizzling grill. Or when somebody puts a pill in their mouth, there's a very, very audible popping sound. And he did all of these different things that a lot of directors since have kind of borrowed. Like, there's the one particular shot that happens a couple of times where it's after Tyrone is the assassination has happened right in front of him, and it's when Marion's leaving the psychiatrist's apartment. We get this shot where they're moving, but the camera's like, it's kind of doing a shaky cam thing, but the camera is in front of them, and it's kind of an upward shot of their face as they're getting out of wherever they're getting out of. I know Chris Rock used it in I Think I Love My Wife when he was running away from Kerry Washington. And on the commentary, he specifically calls it the Requiem for a Dream shot.
Nice.
And with all of this, I'm really, really curious about the book. I've never laid eyes on the book, but I'm really wondering just how descriptive it is. Because this movie, Aronofsky took full advantage of the visual medium and sound. And just pretty much the whole movie is based on that, the effectiveness of that. And he uses a lot of other different styles that hadn't really been used that much before, like the scene where Harry and Marion are laying next to each other, but it's a split screen. But they kind of come in and out of each other's split screen as they're touching each other, and it's a really interesting way to do the scene. And that transition where we kind of see all the we learn basically that all the drugs are kind of on the same level. That's the feeling that it gives us, because we kind of see Harry, Marion, and Tyrone all doing the really, really hard shit, like the shooting up and the powder and all that, and it transitions right into Sarah taking the sleeping pills. Like they're just all on the same level of their addictions. I thought that was a really good way to do it. And then just how, just the way it kind of gradually gets to where it's going throughout the movie. Like I said, when it starts off with Harry and Marion, their fantasy romance looks like something out of like a dream. Or when he keeps seeing like Marion on the long dock. Everything just seems wonderful. But then as the movie progresses and gets more and more out of control, the movie aesthetically gets uglier and uglier on purpose until it's just unbearable to even look at. I try not to, but whenever I actually look, when they show Harry's infected arm, it's a good few hours before I'm over it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the acting is spectacular, especially Ellen Burstyn. Like I said, I can't speak for her maybe deserving the win over Julia Roberts, but I can say that she definitely deserved the nomination. Like, there is the great scene where we finally see her perspective of it, where she basically says being on this show and being thin enough to fit in that red dress again is literally the only reason she has to live. She has a whole Oscar monologue about it. And then there's plenty of memorable scenes that I'm sure you've heard talk. Even if you haven't seen the movie, I'm sure you've heard these scenes referenced many, many, many times. Maybe we'll start with a scene involving Keith David. Where they really use Keith David's sinister voice to good use. They had the close-up of his teeth and everything when he says something wicked. When he's basically a guy that's set up to, Marion will give him sex for money so they can pay for drugs. Because they've since run out. Because he and Tyrone had this big plan. They were going to distribute and become huge, and everything was going to be great, but then they missed the distributor and everything went wrong and they lost a lot of money. Practically all of their money. So now Marion makes money for them by basically becoming a prostitute of sorts. So first off, she sleeps with her psychiatrist in the earlier scene, and then we have this scene with Keith David where we realize what's going on, and he takes it out, and I believe his line is, "Baby, I know it's pretty, but I didn't take it out for air." He just plays that really sleazy character. I honestly would not have thought of him for this part, but good God, he owns it.
Yeah.
Because usually, that voice is usually kind of smooth, but he's using that smoothness for a whole different thing now. And then, of course, eventually, the scene everybody knows, that's a lot more vivid in this version, the director's cut. The director's cut actually has, I think, one scene of penetration in it. So, yes, of course we're talking about the scene where Keith David says, my friends are having a little get-together on Sunday, and it'd be great if you came by. Of course, this get-together is a giant sex show. A lesbian sex show, more or less. Mm-hmm. So they're throwing money out there, it's dark, everybody's covered in sweat, and it's just darkness with blue lights. And all of this is going on. And they finally say, okay, what do we do now? And a guy calls out from the middle of the crowd, ass to ass. And one of the more famous movie scenes since the year 2000 plays out. But we get this ending. This big ending where everybody has reached rock bottom. They may be below rock bottom. All at the same time, Tyrone has taken Harry to the hospital because his arm is about to literally fucking fall off. It is just black and red and disgusting. So, because they basically did the Midnight Cowboy thing. With Tyrone being John Voight, I guess, and Jared Leto being Dustin Hoffman in this case, because he's the one that wanted to go to Florida, but he's kind of like on the verge of death in the passenger seat. So when they get there, they take him to a hospital finally. Just as Sarah has finally shown up to the show. Now, of course, she's not there to actually be on the show, but she shows up. She's totally and completely strung out on these diet pills, saying, I'm going to be on TV, and I'm going to meet everybody, and we're going to give the prizes away, and my son Harry's going to be on the show with me, and it's going to be great. And they have security take her to a institution of sorts, where they're going to give her electroshock therapy because she's basically long gone by this point. The diet pills have just fried her completely. So in this cut back and forth, vicious, visceral montage, we see Marion taking part in the sex show, Tyrone in jail because he was arrested for, they realized the drug possession because of why Harry was at the hospital. Harry's arm is being amputated, and she's getting the electric shock. And this is all happening in one completely impossible to watch montage. As the theme plays, this theme has been like, this theme also was borrowed a lot. This theme was in a billion trailers at one point. And you may not know it by its name. I think it's just called Requiem for a Dream. But as soon as you hear it, you're like, oh my god, I've seen so many trailers with that song. And it's just, it really, really, no holds barred, takes you into that drugged out world. And basically gives you what you would imagine to be the exact perspective they have. And the title basically refers to the fact that for these four people, the American dream is totally and completely dead. They all end up in their respective positions, with Harry in the hospital with one arm, and Marion totally and completely degrading herself as far as you can go, and Tyrone in prison, and Sarah spending the rest of her life fantasizing in an institution, and they all just curl up into the fetal position, laying the exact same way. And we end on Sarah's vision of her and Harry on the game show, to where she's basically going to be lost in her fantasies until she's dead. And that's the bleak outlook that Requiem for a Dream has. Which you know is going to be a bleak movie simply by its title, but they really, really deliver on that. But kind of on the other side of the spectrum, we have Trainspotting. Trainspotting begins with Ewan McGregor narrating as he's running away from the cops. He and Sick Boy and Spud all running away from the cops, which we eventually circle back around to. And what I love that Trainspotting did was it let us know, first off, that Renton is the main character, because obviously Ewan's the one narrating.
Yeah.
And in Renton's narration, the opening narration is about 2 minutes long. And in that 2-minute narration, we learn everything we need to know about Renton. Because he gives his big choose life speech, which I love. Like, the family, the kids, the fucking big television, all that, the 3-piece suite. But then he doesn't choose life. He tells us how he went the other way. And basically chose the life of heroin. And the really interesting thing about this is, even though, this is kind of weird to say, but he talks about how we have all the responsibilities when we do choose life, and all the things that we do, and all the concerns that we have. And he says, but why all worry about all that for no reason? Why have reasons when you have heroin? And when you listen to this narration, like I said, I'd never, promote this or anything, but anybody has to admit that in this narration, Renton actually puts up what seems to be a fair argument in favor of him doing heroin.
Yeah, pretty much.
He actually makes a convincing argument as to why he needs to do this. And then this goes into the rest of his group, starting with Sick Boy. Sick Boy is Johnny Lee Miller, who, of course, Sick Boy spends most of the movie even when he's on drugs or when he's not on drugs, because he goes on and off throughout the movie. He has this obsession with James Bond and Sean Connery, which, of course, is like an in-joke, because Johnny Lee Miller's grandfather is Bernard Lee, who was him in most of the Bond movies, the older ones. So, and Sick Boy is that character where no matter what he's doing, like whether he's just out fucking around or whether he's about to shoot up, he always dresses himself in really nice suits. Maybe not really nice suits, but he dresses himself very well for the activities he partakes in. And he's even got his secret stash of the heroin and the needle in like the heel of his shoe. And he basically just goes on these tangents where he's basically talking to himself about Sean Connery or Ursula Andress or whatever. And he's that guy where, at the beginning of the movie, Renton does quit for a little bit. And then Sick Boy does when he does. And in his narration, Renton says, Sick Boy basically quit just so he could annoy me. Just so he could show how easily he can do it. He's that kind of character. The scene where they take the rifle to the park and just aim it at people. See, I've always really liked the character of Sick Boy. And then there's Spud. Spud is the weird one that Ewan Bremner plays, who I've talked about a lot recently. I don't even know if I'm saying his first name right. But, he's basically the he's basically the character that nothing but bad luck happens to him. He's the one that goes to Shirley Henderson's house and accidentally shits the bed. He's the one who goes to the job interview on speed. Unintentionally, though.
Yeah.
And they're like, what do you get out of the leisure business? And I get pleasure out of other people's leisure. That's a great scene.
Sounds like it.
And yeah, this is one of the... Only Danny Boyle could make a shit joke in a movie that actually works. With them in the parents' kitchen and the sheets, and... It's just one of those scenes that gets out of control of the character and manages to work, right? Especially given that's like the whole context of the character. It's just the worst things happen to him. And then we go into Begbie. Francis Begbie is the complete psychopath played by Robert Carlyle, and this performance is amazing. He's so great in this movie that I can't believe it. When we first meet him, he's at the bar and he's telling this made-up story about why he beat the fuck out of a guy. He beat the fuck out of the guy for no reason with a pool stick, but he's trying to make it sound like he beat the guy up because the guy was staring at him. And he's drinking out of this giant glass mug, and they're on like an upstairs platform in a crowded bar. So Begbie takes the last drink out of this giant glass mug and then just throws it over his shoulder into the crowd, and it breaks over this woman's head and busts her head open. And this starts a bar fight that he starts. Because he goes downstairs and says, alright, we're not going to go anywhere until we find the fuck that caused this. And they say, why, I think you caused this. And he looks to the sky and screams, yes! And just beats the shit out of everybody. This character is off his fucking rocker, and you can't wait to see what he's gonna do next, because he's such an unpredictable person. And the crazy thing is that he's one of the few characters on the movie that's not even on drugs. Yeah. He's totally clean. He drinks a lot and he smokes a lot, but he's basically clean. And he's the craziest person in the movie. Pretty much every time he gets into some kind of fight, even if it's just a small scuffle, his first instinct out of habit and reflex is to whip his knife out. He goes over to that totally unarmed guy, beats the shit out of him with a pull cue, and when the guy's on the ground in pain, he whips the knife out.
He's got to get the job done.
And the great thing about this is, it was even mentioned to the writer of the novel later, and the guy loved it, and basically said that was kind of the idea. Robert Carlyle basically decided to play Begbie as a closeted gay guy, whose rage came out when he thought he was going to be outed.
Nice.
And the writer came out and said, yeah, the initial idea was that Begbie's sexuality was ambiguous. So that's a nice little tidbit when you watch Carlyle's performance. There's a lot of really memorable scenes, like everybody remembers the worst toilet in Scotland. Everybody's traumatized by that scene, and it's really funny if you read up on it because it says all the brown in that scene was just chocolate, and the room actually smelled really good on the set.
Think of it that way, and you might be able to deal with it.
No, I still can't watch Sallow, even knowing it's just like chocolate and marmalade.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there's the character of Tommy, that's Kevin McKidd. And we have his tragic story because he was one of the few characters in the movie that didn't do drugs. And then the girl broke up with him because of something Renton did. And he went to Renton and said, just let me see what it's like. I just want to know what it's like. And he ends up getting hooked on heroin. And of all the people in the movie who are drugged out of their minds, Tommy's the one that dies of an OD. Well, no, it's not an OD, it's toxoplasmosis, because he tried to get his girlfriend a kitten to win her back, and it just pissing shit everywhere. And I guess it made him sick, and he eventually had migraines and a stroke, and he just kind of died in his own vomit.
What a way to go.
And he was the cleanest character in the movie at the beginning, of course. It's like Heroin Bob and SLC Punk. And then we have the scene where Ren ODs, which I've always loved. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, if not my favorite scene, where they've neglected the baby and the baby has died because they were stoned for like days. So then Renton goes and gets a hit from Peter Mullen, and ODs immediately. And he's on this red rug, and he sinks into the rug, and we see, like, basically the perspective of his OD is what he's looking up at, as if it's really far away, and on the sides are this red rug, like, from where he sunk into it. And, Lou Reed's song Perfect Day is put to use. That's the first time I heard it.
Nice.
Now you hear it everywhere.
Yeah.
That's probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. And showing that Danny Boyle early in his career had those really great directorial touches that he puts in movies now. A lot of people think he overdoes his directorial choices, but I love the shit that Danny Boyle does. I think he's got a real eye for catching things. I will mention it's really funny that this movie has such its own language and like the slang terms. If you do buy the novel, which I did, the back of the book has an entire glossary.
Nice.
Of their slang. And it's like a full-size glossary. But the thing about it that I think it kind of rises above Requiem for a Dream is that, well, first off, obviously they take totally different approaches because Requiem for a Dream is as bleak as it possibly gets. Surprisingly, to where all the dark places it goes, like the baby on the ceiling, everybody knows about that. Trainspotting's ending is actually really optimistic. Because Ren's trying to convince us that he's a bad guy because he did rip them off. But when he actually says that he's going to go straight now, you actually believe him. And I love the way the movie ends when he goes back into the Choose Life speech with the family, the friends, the fucking big television, the car, the three-piece suite, and Christmas, and the washing machines, and just does all that. And the movie starts to end in the middle of his speech to where when it ends and shows you the title while he's still going on, I think that's kind of where I totally buy it, that I think Ren's clean for good now.
That's good.
I'm sure there's plenty of theories, and maybe even the author said something where maybe Renton doesn't, because he was so guilty of that, always saying he was quitting when he wasn't thing.
Mm.
But I've always believed that was Renton quitting for good. But not just that, but the fact that not that I condemn Requiem for a Dream for being bleak, because that's just the world. That's just what it is. But I really, really admire the way Trainspotting was able to go just as bleak, but be really funny too. There are scenes in Trainspotting that are fucking hilarious, even in between the dark stuff. In the same movie where the baby is crawling on the ceiling and spins its head around, I have laughed hysterically at something. And I think that's really impressive. And I think Danny Boyle and the author of the script and the book really, really captured a tone there that would have seemed impossible to pull off, but somehow they did it, and they did it really, really well. The screenplay got nominated for an Oscar, rightfully.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So yeah, as much as I absolutely respect Requiem for a Dream, I don't know that I love Requiem for a Dream, but I do absolutely respect it for what it is. I can say wholeheartedly that I love Trainspotting, and I could watch it a lot. I have, and I will continue to.
Nice.
So of these two, I would choose Trainspotting.
All right. So it's another edition of Versus. Next week, we're actually going to go in animated territory. And if that cryptic comment bugs you, then you're just going to have to wait till next week and find out what I mean by that. So, that is going to be the end of Versus this week. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking Boyhood and The Giver and 4 other films. And that's going to be on your bonus AJ's Movie Reviews, and everything will go back to normal next week with the schedule. So, AJ, any parting words?
That's it.